Hello, everyone. We are the Marketing Mavericks, and today we're taking you through our data analysis project for our grocery store dataset. In this slide, we're examining the context and explanation of the problem we're tackling. For overview, the grocery market data utilize outlets such as websites, catalogs, and deals to curate buying options for customers. Through large datasets, grocery stores are able to better create meaningful insights that cultivate profitable growth for the company. This is extremely valuable as studying customer shopping behavior identifies trends, which subsequently assist grocery stores with identifying effective marketing strategies. First, we wanted to answer, how does age, education, household numbers, and income affect the revenue on different product groupings such as wine, fruits, meats, fish, sweet, and gold products? We wanted to understand how the demographic variables affect revenue on the outcome variables of revenue of different product groupings. Further, we want to answer the question of, under what circumstances do purchasing behaviors such as online, in-store, or catalog lead to different outcomes in the revenue on these product groupings listed above? Ultimately, our aim is to understand how behavioral variables might lead to different outcomes in product revenue. Segment, target, and promotion. For segment, we reference this for the clustering methods in order to provide multiple clusters. Target, this allows for the target market to be identified through smaller segments that provide shared demographics and are otherwise likely buyers of the grocery store's product or service. Promotion, utilizing communicative efforts to target those segments relative to the product ad or service of the grocery store would increase profit. As per the research done by Rakuten, 26% of marketing budgets get wasted because of inefficient marketing strategies. The retail marketing wastage is around 86 billion. In order to promote a healthy and profitable use of marketing tactics, we are obtaining details through 4 marketing analytical goals, which propose the creation of a game plan for reaching prospective consumers and transforming them into customers of the grocery store products and or services.
So here comes our data section in which we have segmented the variables on the basis of demographic and behavioral variables. In total, our dataset has 7 behavioral variables and 6 demographic variables. We have 6 outcome independent variables. Those are amount spent on wine, fruit, meat, fish, and gold. In our dataset, we have 2 types of variables, numerical variables and categorical variables. And we have 17 numerical variables and 2 categorical variables. Next is our data preparation slide. In data cleanup, we did target encoding of 2 categorical variables, that is, we assigned an ORDL number against each string value. Clustering and regression algorithms cannot comprehend string data types, hence there was a need of target encoding. In our data preparation, there were 24 null values in our income columns, so we replaced those missing or null values with averages of all incomes. We also calculated a new variable called amount total, which takes into account the sum of all the amounts spent on wine, meat, fruit, etc. And before performing the clustering operations, we normalized variables as well. We used the method of z-scaling to normalize our variables. We did z-scaling to ensure that one variable does not take precedence over the other because of higher scale range. Next comes our exploratory data analysis step. This slide in particular shows 2 box plots of our 2 categorical variables. This visualizations depict that we have clubbed and transformed normal and junk values in our categorical variables columns into 5 marital status and 4 educational labels. We had 19 variables in our dataset, and it's a tough job to find correlations between each variables manually. Hence, we plotted the correlation matrix, which gives us a head start in identifying the patterns and finding a relationship between 2 variables. The number in the matrix are Pearson correlation coefficients. Color encoding is such that darker the color, more is the correlation between 2 variables.
Now, I'll be talking more about some of the detailed insights which we wanted to run before going deep into the clustering and the regression methods. On your left-hand side, if you see the total amount spent on wine was positively correlated with the income. And on the other hand, when we see that the amount spent on wine was decreasing if you have more kids at home. Next, we were able to see similar patterns when compared with total amount spent on all the products and compared with kids or teens at home, it was reducing. And on the right hand side, if you see, the number of deal purchases was increasing with number of teens and kids at home if there are more teens and kids at home. And moving ahead, we were able to see some of the deeper insights, like number of web visits was decreasing if the store purchases was increasing. And on the other hand, the number of deal purchases was increasing if the web visits were increasing. That was kind of making more sense, right? Next, I'm going to talk about the data limitations we had. Firstly, our data source is Kaggle, where we cannot add more data to our data set. Secondly, our data source does not say that what exactly was a data generating process. Secondly, our data is from 2014, which does not involve the COVID disruption era. Thirdly, our data set has some null values in the income section, which we have replaced it with the average value. Fourthly, our data set works with the limited product types, and it does not involve the vast variety of products. And lastly, there is no geographical or the gender data which we could have utilized here.
We identified that we wanted to cluster on either demography or behavior, and then move on to do regression analysis on the other. We went ahead and tried both and decided to finally move ahead with first clustering on demographics and then regression analysis on behaviors such as number of purchases on web or in-store. Our selection of method 1 was because of 3 prime reasons. Number 1, demographic data usually is more predictable and constant with time as compared to behavioral data. Hence, clustering data can be of use for a longer period. Number 2, clustering on demographics makes more sense because segmenting and knowing who your customer is gives a more intuitive way to target promotions. Moreover, other teams in the organization can make use of this data, hence saving costs. Number 3, while we tested method 2 as well, the regressions were much stronger in terms of statistical significance for method 1, hence a more dependable way. The drawback of not using method 2 is that we might not be able to focus our strategies on specific channels initially. Also, the model has limitations such as 4 clusters might probably not be the most efficient as measured by the elbow chart. Zooming out, our first phase is going to be clustering on demographics and then doing regression on each individual clusters on the outcome variables such as amount spent on wine, meat, fruits, and gold products. The second phase will effectively have regression done on all customers combined for the outcome variables. Then we will include inferences from both phases to come up with a combined conclusion. I will not now talk about phase 1. We came up with 4 clusters as a solid base to build our process on. Our cluster tells us who our average cluster personality is. For example, in cluster 3, the average age of the person is 34 years old, has a relatively lower income, and has 1 kid at home but no teen. Once we had our clusters, we ran a regression on all of these clusters for amount spent on items like wine, fruits, meats, etc. This regression was built on behavioral variables such as number of deal purchases, number of web purchases, or number of web visits per month. The R-squared and F values indicate the strength of the models within each sample, and hence we wanted to focus on the outcome variables of wine and meat as priority. Here, the VIF was kept in check and was under around 5. As an example for cluster 3 with regression analysis on amount spent of wine, the amount spent on wine can be explained using the purchasing behavior as given in the equation. With every unit increase in number of in-store purchases, the amount spent on wine increases by $48 for cluster 3. Also, with an increase in every deal purchased, the amount spent on wine decreases by $16. We have our clusters detailed with the many strong inferences that we could observe in our regression. We saw models describing amounts spent on meat and wine having clear signals into the relationship between the amount spent and consumer behaviors. While we cluster users on age, income, kids, or teen at home and do regression on behaviors, we see that there are statistically strong inferences towards meat and wine purchases with these behavioral values. This information can be critically used on how we could do promotions and understand our customers better.
Thanks, Rakshit. Now, for our second phase of our method, we decided to run a regression on the demographic variables in the dataset and then analyze these results with our results from phase 1. So for this regression, the model was built on the demographic variables of education level, income, number of kids at home, and number of teens at home, with the outcome variable as the purchasing totals of wine, fruits, meats, etc. Also, we listed the statistically significant variables for each of the models, those with p-values less than 0.05. So for wine, the statistically significant variables were education, income, and kids at home, for instance. Now we will focus on our regression on the demographics with the amount spent on wine as the outcome variable to compare these findings from phase 1. We note that for one level increase in education, a person will spend $42 more on wine. And for one more kid at home, a person might spend $198 less on wine. Also, for an increase of $1 in income, a person might spend 1 cent more on wine. Now we will move into our overall interpretations of the results. In summary, we found that wine increases with higher education and income, but number of kids at home decreases the amount spent on wine. Also, higher incomes and more kids and teens at home correlate to larger meat purchases and higher overall total purchases as well. We took the analyses from both of our methods, or both of our phases of our methods, to come up with overall analyses between the demographic and behavioral impacts on purchasing. So for the wine example, we conclude that from both phases, having a kid would mean a lesser need to spend on wine than without kids. Deals actually have a negative impact on wine purchases, and more in-store purchases actually tend to correlate with higher wine purchases, which mean more wine revenue. We can guess that these results are as they are because kids take personal time from parents, so there might be less time for wine. Lower incomes might lead consumers to save their money on luxury items like wine, and consumers might tend to purchase alcohol in-store rather than online. Also, we noted that larger households in general probably need more meat and groceries, so there is a higher purchasing total in that regard. One drawback to our method was that correlation is not causation. So there is no indication that demographics or purchasing behavior will actually cause these different purchasing strategies, but we can infer that there are these certain trends that we have noted in the data between the demographics and purchasing behaviors. Another drawback to our method is that we converted our categorical variables to numbers rather than the binary numbers. So our values in the methods, especially in clustering, are slightly less intuitive. For our next steps, our goal was to find a clear way to categorize consumers and identify trends in purchasing behavior and to increase our revenues. So our analyses from these results will help drive our marketing strategy decisions and recommendations on how to market the various grocery products, for example, wine products, to the target demographics. And we thank you for listening, and we open the floor to any questions.